Right. So for the sake of time, we're going to go ahead and get started. I wanted to thank everybody for coming today. Sorry, I'm trying to manage the presentation and the Teams call and talking to you guys. I'll let those people in a minute. So I am Dorina Black. If you don't know me already, I'm the executive chair for Central Florida Marine Corps Foundation, as well as the Marine Corps Birthday Ball chair. We're here today for another professional military education. And I'm just going to do a quick intro and let the gentleman kind of take care of everything else. So when this first was brought to me, I had no idea what is LSE-14, and Baron Mills, as we all know and love, was like, we got to do this one. It's super important. And I was like, okay, I have no idea, but let's do it. You say it's important. Let's go ahead and go for it. So I'm just going to give a brief intro. You know, one of the things that sets Marines apart from the other branches of the military is how much we believe in our history and traditions. Today, we're going to be able to hear from, I got lost my notes. Today, we've got a group of Marines and Patriots who did what Marines do. They saw an opportunity to enhance Marine Corps training, Marine Corps wide, and decided to persevere through when no one else saw the value of how important it was for training and simulation. Today, we present a piece of Marine Corps history from those who lived it. I'm grateful for our community, and I'm grateful for everyone in this room for taking the time to be here and witness another battle that Marines had the courage to go through. LSE-14 is the story of how the Marine Corps and industry came together to change the course of training in the Marine Corps and to set the platform for Project Tripoli. I'm going to go ahead and next up bring up Colonel Young, because I'm very grateful for everything that PM Traces does to support the foundation. We would not be having these PMEs if it wasn't for her brilliant idea, and I see a lot of growth and potential here. So I'm really going to hand it over to you, ma'am, and then off to the panel. Thank you.
Thank you, Dorina. All right, good afternoon. Thank you for being here today. Thank you for Central Florida putting this together. And thank you to our panelists for first living this experience and then be willing to share it with us. I think professional military education is extremely important to, one, to develop who we are in the Marine Corps. We do a lot of professional military education. And then in our acquisition community, we look at a lot of case studies. We look at how did somebody do something? Should I do that path, or just to learn from others' experience? It's extremely important. The history of what we've done and where we are today leads us in the direction of where we can go. And I think in the acquisition community, especially in modeling sim, and in that place where you look at a model, this is the model of that something has happened. Now, how can we use that to shape our future? And that's something that's really important from an acquisition perspective. How do we model where we're trying to go? And how do we do that in an environment where it's a lot of personalities and different perspectives, different responsibilities, different authorities that we all kind of bring together? And every time I see a program fielded, I think that, look at that success. What did it take? The hours, the late hours, the thought process, the eureka moments of it, we can actually do this, requires somebody to push through some resistance. And that's what I would offer to you today is, when we meet that resistance, wherever that resistance is, how do we find opportunities to go through it, to get around it, to find advocacy from our leadership to accomplish something that is oftentimes a vision of a senior leader to see this particular event happen. For LSE, it was getting, I'm just talking to myself now. But I've seen that in my short time in acquisitions. Oftentimes, whether it's a contract going from idea to award, or whether it's even a capability manifesting into something that we can use. For instance, like the Wargaming Center, the Neller Center in Quantico, just seeing that thing actually become a building took a lot of time, and it was General Neller's thought, like, this is what I want to see happen. So the advocacy piece is extremely important as we push forward in the different things that we're asking our industry partners to do, and what we're asking our Marines, our sailors, our civilian employees to do is having that advocacy to push what we need to do to support and develop our warfighters. And so thank you for taking the time to be here today. Please prepare your questions to ask this panel. How did they accomplish the things they did? And then how do they see what's the future going to look like as we continue to push through these type of resistance to change? At the same time, there's a lot of policies that are coming down to support where we're trying to go. So over to Luis Vasquez. Thank you, sir, for taking the time to be here.
Thank you so much. All right, good afternoon, everybody. And thank you, Rena, for welcoming remarks. It is really an honor to serve as your moderator today to commemorate an important chapter in the evolution of Marine Corps training and simulations. Looking around the room, I see many of the individuals who helped shape that history. Some of you were there from the beginning. Others have joined the journey over the years. Together, we have helped transform what was once considered an ambitious vision into capabilities and now fundamentals of how the Marine Corps trains and prepares for future conflicts. Today's symposium has three major objectives. First, we want to recognize the people behind the technology, programs, simulations, and architectures that do not innovate on their own. It is a dedication of Marines, sailors, acquisition professionals, engineers, government civilians, and industry partners working together that make innovation possible. Second, we want to revisit the lessons learned from one of the Marine Corps' most significant live, virtual, and constructive training events. The One Marine Corps Expeditionary Brigade large-scale exercise from 2014 were known as LSE-14. Many of the concepts that were commonplace today were proven during that exercise, often with limited resources, but not with unlimited determination and dedication. Finally, we want to look ahead. The technologies may have changed from standalone simulators to cloud computing, artificial intelligence, digital twin, and coalition-ready digital ecosystems. But the mission remains the same, preparing Marines to make better decisions faster and increasingly complex operational environments. To appreciate where we are today, it's helpful that we understand where we began. So let's go to the second slide, please. So during the time of the LSE-14, I had just retired about 6 years prior from the Marine Corps, and I was a civilian. I was a deputy for modeling simulations for the Marine Corps out of Mark Syscop. Prior to that, I worked as a officer and training education man back in 1995, where I saw a bunch of Marines who were not paying attention when I was talking to them, and I asked them what they were doing, and they were playing on the 386 computer something called Doom. And I said, the light went on. I said, if that's what they're doing and dedicated to playing, what if we were to modify the game and give it real characteristics, strip away all the artificial behaviors of jumping out of a window with an 80-pound pack and surviving from a 15th floor, drop. That weapon systems don't fire unlimited. And if you get hit, you get stopped. So we modified the game with the permission of id, and we created something called Marine Doom. If that's an early snapshot of someone hidden behind a giant computer, 386 in the monitor, enough radiation to kill the entire room. But they were dedicated. We set up fire team tactics, and that's what they were stressing. And that's what the next slide, please. Hit the slide, please, on the video. This is an actual broadcast of that event that made national headlines.
Take my position, guys. Back up. Get up, Ford. Back up. Feel it. Get back to it. Get on your shoulder. Push gap.
What you've got is virtual warfare in the Marine fatigue. For months, Marine fire teams have been training at computer labs in Virginia, Georgia, and North Carolina, learning battlefield tactics and decision making.
If they spend a whole lot of time doing that in an operating environment that's kind of confusing, noisy, like a real battlefield situation would be, then they'll be that much more effective as a unit in a real battlefield environment.
If the format looks familiar, it's because developers altered the popular video game Doom by substituting monsters with Marines and fantasy weapons with M16s.
But on a computer generated, didn't really catch on the idea that we could do this. So we made people look like Marines and then they were like, oh yeah, that's right.
The Marines are focusing on several other video games to enhance standard field training, which is costly and time-consuming. Besides saving taxpayer dollars, officers point out the games can eventually be reprogrammed with the floor plans of U.S. embassies. That way, Marines could prepare rescue missions in advance in case of situations like the 1979 seizure of U.S. diplomats in Iran.
Having a picture, a mental image of what's around that corner up there in terms of does the hall continue or does the hall stop? Is this room an air conditioning closet, or is this where an office where I could have the bad guys, the opposing force be lurking?
The biggest advantage for computer board games, you live to laugh about your mistakes.
The battlefield is still chaotic, a very dangerous, funny business. What we're trying to do is ensure that we don't have any more casualties than necessary when we get on that battlefield.
Kathleen spoke for CNN, Washington. Not that it's like me.
Next slide, please. As a result of the General Van Riper and Colonel Hanover's aggressive approach to saying that we need to get this technology into the hands of the everyday Marine, not just for the war gamer at the top level staff, but down to the hands of the individual fighting Marine. We got Marine Corps orders that allowed Marines to play games. Some of you were probably active duty back in the day. You remember that, saying, why are we publishing an order to allow Marines to have X number of hours to play on a game during work days? Well, it's because they can get those sets and reps, which you're going to hear again when General Mattis later on, almost 20 years later, says the same thing. Next slide, please. Then came in 2007, where I was very fortunate to run into a colleague who's up here on the table at the end, Colonel Walt Yates. At the time, he was the Major Walt Yates at 29 Palms, and I was at Training Education Command. And he recognized the opportunity to connect Marines training on virtual battlespace 2, which is PM Traces for making that available to the Marines, and to integrate with the Air Force 130, AC-130 gunship simulator out of Herbert Field. This effort became known as the Virtual Drone Fires Integration Center, and then we called it BJFIT. Using only a handful of integration devices and very limited funding, we demonstrated that distributed live virtual constructive training was not only technically possible, it is operational valuable. Marines preparing to deploy to Iraq conducted convoy security and quick reaction force missions while conducting fires with Air Force crews hundreds of miles away. And actually, for the first time, we were able to link up actual Air Force pilots that were going to deploy at the same time the Marines that were on the ground doing the training with them virtually. Usually it's the other way around. It's hard for them to be synced up and deploy in the same status. But this was one of those rare opportunities where that voice that he heard at the other end of the line, for that 9 line, was the actual pilot or the actual Air Force rep he would be talking to in real time in theater. So they were doing quick reaction force missions and coordinating fires with Air Force crews. The realism was so immense and immersive that Marines and airmen at both sides at Herbert Field and at 29 Palms would skip their meals to continue the training. We also heard that on the other side of the Air Force, the crews, they would argue so they could stay in the simulator to complete the mission to provide the Marines who are running that convoy mission, the support that they started with. So you'll see in a couple of slides here, the immersive aspect of the AC-130 gunship. Next slide. That's their COC that shows the virtual battlespace 2 interfacing integrated with their AC-130 gunship simulator. Next slide. You can see VBS in the front. You can see their views of the virtual views of the battlespace. Next slide. And that mimics and mocks every setup that they would have on the deployed AC-130 gunship. So they walk in, all the knobs, everything, the comms, exactly mirrors exactly as they would see deployed. And so what they would see in their screens were the Marines in the convoy on VBS. And thanks to VBS being in high fidelity, they were able to map it into their simulation. And that was, once again, on a low budget. Just a couple of Marines who said, we think we can make this work. And I thank you, Walt Yates, for letting us go through that at 29 Palms. So 7 years later, that mission expanded dramatically during the one med large-scale exercise 2014. This time, it's Lieutenant General John Tulin. Many of you may have worked with him in the past, and you know his vigor and his strength for making change. Commanding General 1MEF challenged the Marine Corps to think differently. Rather than viewing live virtual and constructive capabilities as independent systems, he saw them as a force multiplier capable of augmenting live training and creating a more realistic operational environment. What made LSE-14 remarkable was not simply the technology. It was a collaboration organization across the Marine Corps, the Department of Defense, and industry came together to solve integration challenges that no single organization could solve alone. It demonstrated that interoperability was achievable when everyone focused on the mission rather than organizational boundaries that limit the ability to support each other. Today, those same principles continue to guide our work. We have cloud computing that has replaced dedicated networks. We have artificial intelligence assisting white cells and decision makers. We have digital engineering that enables rapid capability development. We have digital wargaming that allows commanders to explore courses of action before conducting and committing forces. We have coalition interoperability that is no longer an aspiration, but as you can see through everyday media, it's operational necessity. The technologies have evolved, but the foundational lessons remain remarkably consistent. So over the next few hours, you're going to hear directly from many of the individuals who made this journey possible. Many of them have gone on beyond their careers in the Corps, and have made significant strides in industry. I myself, as I retired from the federal government, I went into industry and just recently won the NATO Diana Award for the company, which is out of 410 European companies, only 10 were selected, and we got that. That's a monumental leap, bringing in technology to bear to support the warfighter. So Marine Black welcomed us and reminded us of PM Trace's enduring mission to provide realistic, relevant training capabilities. We thank you for that. I want to go ahead and start a video that shows the LSE-14 in narration. Next slide.
The video.
Yes.
What the live virtual constructive allows you to do is it enables you to stretch the Marine Expeditionary Brigade. So we can fight over a greater piece of terrain on a map, and it's simulated, of course, it's constructed. But that's the first thing that I would say it does. It also allows you to tailor the training to meet certain objectives. So you can have people that are sort of behind the curtain who can do things to you through the virtual constructive world that you might not otherwise be able to do.
Our primary goal for General Tulin was that common operational picture. He wanted to say, can I see my virtual sims on that common operational picture? Normally the Marine Corps runs their MAGTF exercises with things like M12s. By tying in virtual sim devices, we're able to pull a big track off those systems and get it to a common operational picture.
Part of what we're doing out here at LSE-14 is integrating this stuff, but then also we're taking assessments. So we have folks, some human performance people, some specialists from NAMIR, and they're out here and they, after everybody runs through a mission or a scenario, they give them some training forms. Hey, Marine, did you feel like you were involved in the scenario? Did you feel like you were actually driving? You know, everything isn't perfect, right? So what didn't you like? How can we help you improve the system or improve your connection or enhance the scenario or the technology to give you a better experience? So I think it's kind of incumbent on us as the training department to use it to train Marines. There's one thing, it's technology is one thing, but my focus, a lot of my I'm not going to be training Marines. Right? If I can use these technologies to help train Marines better or more efficiently, and that's the charter I have in the command in general, right? It's going to be about 15,000 people or so, 3 battalions, a big regiment on it. But we don't have the maneuver space. We don't have the actual land or the active forces to be able to bring all those guys into an exercise of that size. So what it gives to the Met is the Met commander, when he looks at his common operational picture, his chart on the wall, it actually feels like he's maneuvering all those forces. He feels like he has a full Marine Air Group back at Miramar supporting, where in reality, he doesn't have those because they're committed to other missions. So it gives the Met the ability to actually exercise at the full capability without being constrained by assets or land or anything like that. The Met now is getting its training, just like you have all these forces out here. And then you have certain selected elements that are doing live, certain other selected that are virtual. It all kind of combines to train the meta. The big thing with the Met, the middleweight fighting force is, and Europe here is, we can't afford to train like we're in a static position. A lot of operations in Afghanistan and Iraq, Marines get into a certain deployment rotational cycle, right? We need to be prepared to respond to crises throughout the globe. So as part of the MEB, we can either be coming off that amphibious shipping or we've flown into an objective area or to a country to enable a bigger force. So we need to be flexible. We need to be able to do operations all the way from near peer competitor like we're trying in this exercise down to humanitarian assistance or disaster relief. So a Marine part of the MEB, he really needs to be well rounded. He's not going to go to a forward operating base and just drive convoy routes that 6, 8, 10 other units in the past 5 years have really driven right before. He's going to a country where the MEB hasn't been before to go to find those convoy routes himself. But all you have to do is planning based off, this is a new scenario, this is a new place to go. Explore, begin with Iraq. They're interacting with the forward air control, they're being stimulated at a rapid pace, and then they love it. The more action, the better.
But
It's very much like a video game. So people will say, how do you replicate an immersive environment, with a laptop and a headset? It's really kind of a mindset. So, they use systems like this out at Moss 1. I'm not going to put it out there to train. So it's a Marine Aviation Tactics Squad 1. And you get immersed.
We go back 2 slides to the OB one. There you go, right there. Thank you. So unfortunately for this afternoon, Baron Mills could not be here today. He was definitely a driving principle behind trying to get this event organized. So once you heard earlier, he was going to discuss PM Tracy's role in building upon the success of LSE-14 and how his leadership engagement helped, and including briefing the Assistant Commandant of the Marine Corps during the exercise itself, shaping the future direction of Marine Corps training. Next will be Robert Sosa, who served as the lead system integrator for LSE-14, who will take us behind the scenes of one of the Marine Corps' most ambitious integration efforts. He'll discuss the technological challenges, the partnership that made success possible, and the lessons learned that continue to influence the Marine Corps training today. Following Robert Sosa will be Nathan Jones, who will discuss one of the most important aspects, at least for me, of modern training, is how we measure the effectiveness of all these simulation simulators. You can put them all together, but it would look to anybody from the outside, especially at the senior level, that's what the scientists running around the desert. The test has measured the effectiveness to show that there's quantifiable and qualifiable metrics that say the Marines are learning, the sets and reps are improving the Marines, they're giving the better reaction time. Because we know technology alone does not improve readiness, it's meaningful data, the analytics and objective assessments that really help drive the budget. And finally, it'll be Walt Yates, who closed our formal presentation by looking toward the future of the Marine Corps Live virtual constructive and training simulations. I know of only a few individuals have had a greater influence on distributed live virtual constructive training over the past few decades, and his perspective on where to go next is particularly fitting for today's discussion. Once we conclude with the individual panel member discussions, we will then have a panel discussion where all our speakers will have the opportunity to entertain questions, reflect on lessons learned of the past, and answer your questions about the future. As you listen today, I encourage you to think beyond the individual systems and technologies. Think instead of the people who are willing to take the challenge of conventional thinking, collaborate across organizations, and prove that innovation doesn't begin with technology. It begins with the vision, the leadership, and commitment to preparing Marines to fight. With that, it's my pleasure to introduce our first presenter as someone who is clearly instrumental in making LSE-14 a success. If you were there during that time, you saw he was on fire, running across all the organizations and acting as the lead system integrator. Robert unified government organizations, program offices, and industry partners into a single team that delivered one of the most successful Marine Corps distributed live virtual constructed training events that when recorded in Marine Corps lessons learned, you could download. He's quoted and is cited. His efforts were absolutely astronomical in making this happen. So with that, I turn it over to you, Robert. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Luis. Appreciate it, sir. Thank you, Luis. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Colonel Young. Ra. Central Florida Marine Corps Foundation for the opportunity to tell the story. The story is about all of us. Really it is. There's a lot of people in this room that I see in here that were with me every single day on the phone, what we did together. It wasn't me. I just was the guy in uniform at the time. Starting real quick, I'm a MAX Marine, Marine Air Command and Control Systems. When you read the word MAGTF, right, Marine Air Ground Task Force, I like to say there's a hyphen in the middle, right? It's probably not in any doctoring, but you can't get aircraft, move logistics on airplanes or helicopters. Medevacs, we were that hyphen that linked the ground and the air, fires, logistics, and maneuver, right? So that still happens today. Now it's called the MAOC, right? So not only do they support that logistical support to the ground, but they're also protecting us in the sky, and that's going on in Bahrain. I'm sorry, in Ukraine right now, right? So God bless all the Marines over there. I just want to make sure I give them a shout out first. I didn't know what LBC was. I didn't know what simulation was. Being a MAX Marine, the grunts didn't want to train with me. The pilots said, I'm too busy. I'm doing what we're doing. Even more in my community, ACE didn't want to own me and buy me a simulator. And PM Tracer didn't either, because we just were that stepchild, you can call us. We deployed with the senior fire support coordination centers, and we were labeled an aircraft underneath the aircraft wing. So a lot of politics that I dealt with back then, but it kind of got me here. So what did I have to do? I had to figure out training for Marines, right? How do we train our Marines? Current simulators we had at the time did not link to C2 systems. Luckily, we have the AV plan. The aviation community does a really good job on TNR training. And by using that AV plan, we're able to link to the aviation network, AVTB, and I'll tell you a little bit about that here in a second, which allowed me to have controllers in the field on their C2 gear, talking to pilots who woke up in their bed, conducting training and readiness across the cycle, right? But we needed to integrate the ground systems, and that's where we kind of fell short. Okay, that's where I started. From there, shout out to General Wise, who's the deputy ace commander at the time. He then worked for General Tulin, right? Meth ace in the construct. And he told Lieutenant General Wise, hey, you're going to be the LVC 1 meth lead, General Wise. I worked with General Wise every day. I was part of his Tactical Air Command Center. And he said, Top, we're going to go and brief the general. So I said, cool. I went up there. I showed him what we did as a MAX community. And he said, hey, I got these other simulators in this building, and I can't get them in my live events. What do we need to do? In my opinion at the time, was training like a MAGTF, right? Build your architecture around that. From there, I got this weird phone call from a guy named Baron Mills. Baron is amazing. He's been a good person to me for many years. I think he's helped a lot of people in this room. He's a giver. And he gave me the opportunity to attend my first ITSEC and see what this was all about. And to just put that in perspective as the fleet community and what's going on, and it's probably went on for decades, I didn't know ITSEC existed. I didn't know we had simulators. And this is me at let's say 13, 14 years in the Marine Corps. All right, I think we got to fix that a little bit back then. I think we're getting better, but that's where I was mentally. So I show up to this massive room with simulators, and I'm like, whoa, right? Got to go on the warfighter panel, walked up there, little intimidated, right? Because the guy that went before me was Air Force PJ flying around 860s, saving lives. And he got to tell a story. Here I am about to talk about simulation and training. Different, but to me, the same value. We're really talking about saving lives, whether it's for training Marines every day, right? Giving them an environment to go to that highest level of training, or actually doing it when we go combat, right? So we're preparing those Marines for combat. That same day, I had one of those little rooms, the corridor off at ITSEC, B37. I have no idea where I'm at in this place. I've only traveled with Marine units, right? So this is my first I'm on my own, right? We do that every day now. And in that room was most of you, I'd say, right? Kenny Beerling, Anthony Cross, and this young man here walked up to me with his briefcase, right? Have you guys seen Luis with his laptop? And he put that black and white picture on the wall. And I was like, and this is where I learned a lot immediately. I was like most, I don't need your help, right? I was gunning, right? I had general tooling, I had funding. I don't need y'all's help. We're going to tell you what to do. That's how I started this, right then. And what I soon realized when I got back to Miramar was I needed a lot of help. Right? I didn't understand. I didn't see, right? And I like the points, Luis, about knowing where you came from, right? LSE was successful because of people like Walt Yates, right? And what they did. Luis had the background on everything we did, right? Barron was here at PM Traces with some of the smartest people I've ever worked with, right? So that's how this all started. I'm going to babble for a while. I'm going to try and read. Might cry, I'm a little emotional and passionate about it, but you guys have probably seen it before if you've worked with me. I'm truly honored to be here. Just a quick raise of hands if you don't mind. Can you raise your hand if you were part of LSE? You don't have to. If you were in the background, if you were in the office, if you were doing something different. Yeah, I figured there's some, I know there's some people online as well. You know, I look around the room and I simply see an audience, I see teammates, right? Marines, civilians, government engineers, acquisition professionals, operators, communicators, software developers, right? You know, some of us spent months together, and I know we spent a month together in the dirt. Joss and Ken Sells stayed in Palm Springs, though, so they had life. Two instrumental people to help me out. Some of us spent years preparing for what eventually became 30 days in the desert. When people hear that I served as a lead systems integrator for the live virtual constructive exercise, they think about computers, networks, simulators, software, protocols, and those things all matter to what we were doing. But after more than 10 years of reflection, I realized that they were never the real story. The real story was how hundreds of people from dozens of organizations learned to trust each other enough to build something none of us could have built by ourselves. This brought different priorities, different schedules, different funding, different ideas, how things should work. We're all stuck in our bubble. I still am sometimes too. Our job was to bring all that together to make it functional as a team. The Marine Corps, because of 2014, the Marine Corps, or the MEF, let's say, wasn't simply running another exercise. We were trying to fundamentally change how Marines train in a large combat environment. This is my favorite OV. This is the first one we wrote. I put this together, and then it kind of got passed through as we went through. This to me still says the same thing that we're doing now. Like if you think about what we're doing, this basic OV is what we're doing as we move forward. Kind of walk through a little bit. You saw it on the slide. Some key things to point out when we were in the slide. You saw Aaron Villaverdi, right? And CCS convoy, if you know Big V. He's in there driving it. Another voice you heard, my person that wrote my fit rep, Lieutenant Colonel Steve Mount, very instrumental. He went on from there to become the Wounded Warrior CO, Cobra pilot, amazing guy. We're currently working on the NCT side right now for the Navy. Chris Getchell, he wasn't heard. He's the lead tech advisor for Booz Allen Hamilton on Project Tripoli. These are people that taught me how to do LVC, right? I take credit as I go, but I can say back then, this is how we all work together. And then we got to get into the organizations, right? You saw that SAVT, right? You saw that dome simulator up here. Well, that basically, when you saw that aircraft flying there, that aircraft was in Camp Pendleton. Right? The pilot woke up in his bed, had training and readiness standards to come and attack and support, and he ran JTAC missions. Go back, please. He ran JTAC missions with Marines from SAVTE. We work with PM Traces. Again, smartest people I've ever worked with. Right here on the bottom. This entire green environment, if you don't mind, let's pull that up real quick. The bubbles. came to Orlando 4 times after that. We met, we had meetings. The engineer said, Rob, calm down. I was like, all right, well, what are we gonna do? And they said, give us 2 hours, go to lunch. I went to lunch for 2 hours. They came out with this diagram and it was perfect, right? It understood what we were doing as a team, all right? And you can see here, this is kind of those connections you saw, right? The Cobra helicopter connected through to the cloud. Cactus, unfortunately, not around really drove that cop, right? Really drove all those different simulators as it all moved into one common operational picture, right? Lots of bridges and J buses, lots of DVTE laptops, and working with convoys and this is the DVT classroom, right? Josh Sanby, amazing, set that up with his team. Ken was with him. We also ran a simultaneous event, right? Because most of your simulators are unclassified, right? So how do we get those systems in a classified environment so we can train without having to do cross-domain solutions and things like that? We did some great cross-domain solutions for the unclass, but NavAir was only going to let us have one Cobra, one unclassed system, because all the rest of their systems are on the classified network. So we had pilots in Camp Lejeune, we had pilots in Yuma, we had pilots in Miramar, and pilots in Camp Pendleton that all flew missions connected to our network from their home station. These missions directly supported the targeting cycle process. These missions directly aligned to the air tasking order. Remember, lead systems integrator, however, aligning it to how we train in a live MAGTF. That is how we drew it, right? So a pilot fly the mission, he needs to get TNR, he needs to get his training. We want that to sync, but we also want to, one more up. Sorry, I'm going because I think we're a little over time. Main one, the main. We also want to talk about here, right? ACE, this entire secondary training audience, your ground combat element, your air combat element, and your logistics combat element, they drove the operations. The primary training audience for MSTP by charter is the battle staff, right? We send 15,000 Marines to the field, yet we don't care about the Lance Corporal's training and readiness standards. We're here to train the battle staff, so we spend a lot of money to focus on that. Now, what I've learned is when a Lance Corporal's on a radio and he's passing information all the way up the chain of command, that impacts the battle staff. So we aligned everything as we move forward, and then we did what's called the proof of concept. Oh, I apologize. I'm going to do one more before that. How do we do that? Fortunately, we had a clear vision and we had a champion. General Toolin's vision. Every major transformation began with someone willing to ask different questions. And for large-scale exercise 2014, leaders like Lieutenant John Toolin, rather than focusing on whether one simulator could technically connect to another, he challenged us to think operationally. Can Marines train the way they fight? While that question may seem obvious today, it represents a fundamental shift in thinking in 2013. I was new to simulation. I thought it was just about making systems talk. At the time, aviation simulators operated with their own training enterprise. Ground simulators operated, ground combat simulators trained independently. Constructive simulation primarily supported battle staffs. And live maneuver training occurred separately on ranges. Each community optimized its own systems, maintained its own schedule, managed its own funding, and adhered to its own technical standard. Lieutenant General Toolin envisioned something entirely different. A fully integrated, live virtual constructive training environment where every component of the Marine Air Ground Task Force operated together as a single distributed combat force. His objective was never to showcase technology or demonstrate engineering capabilities. It was to create an operational environment so realistic that commanders and Marines would make decisions exactly as they would in combat. That's the goal, right? Things that we did to make that happen, and we were fortunate, again, people like Gene Apicello, Jay Bell. In order to accomplish building an LVC architecture and incorporating the simulators into a MAGTF concept, we had LVC SMEs in every single planning cell. This meant when the air cell, if you go to a planning conference, decided to say, okay, who's purple air, who's flying the aircraft, are we using the theater battle management core system to write the air tasking order? We had a Marine in that room, and he would sit there and look at the missions that they're flying. And he would then say, okay, this one we can do with a virtual sim. We have the terrain, we have the target, we have the battle space. And he would take that, work with the working group and say, we'll take lines 5, 7, 4, and 3. We'll develop the targets using a virtual simulator. We'll fly the aircraft doing normal status quo, right? Instead of having the puckster move the aircraft around, we have pilots in their cockpits. And then we would send that air tasking order back to the air desk at every base. They would then take that air tasking order and give that to the pilots. Hey, here's your mission for today. That pilot then had to go do his mission planning and work with the MAX community to execute the event. That's across convoy movements, everything across the board. If we send one LVC SME to a SLTE working group or a Steel Knight or a Desert Scimitar or whatever that exercise looks like, you're not getting your sims in the system, right? You're expecting the training line to say, I want to use a simulator. Not gonna happen. Right? Still doesn't happen. So we went there and influenced the documentation, the joint party target cycle, the collection cycle, the air tasking order, the movement cycle for convoys. That's how you get simulators into training, right? Not some BSC saying, oh, can we use these sims for this exercise? And then it happens in the corner, but it doesn't really impact the battle side. That's the goal. That was the problem we were trying to solve. People sometimes ask me what was broke before LSE-14. People sometimes ask me what was broke before LSE-14. Nothing. Sims worked as advertised, right? Every new simulator worked. Every command and control C2 system functioned. Every range operated. Every communication unit knew its mission. The problem wasn't individual capabilities. The problem was integration, just not required at the time, right? OIF, OEF, hey, I need this sim as fast as we could get it. Matches PTP training rather than TNR. We built a lot of sims that way in the past. And then here we are saying, oh, now we want to fight together, but they weren't built that way. And they were built by all of industry, in many different facets. Imagine an orchestra where every musician is world class, but none of them has ever rehearsed together. That was where we started. We had the ADTVE, the Aviation Distributed Virtual Training Environment. If you're not familiar with that, this is where every aviation simulator lives. And that means a pilot from Camp Lejeune and a pilot from Camp Pendleton can hop on an air pad in Guam and fight a mission together. That's how they're connected right now. Right? So they've had more money, aviation, Navy, I got that, believe me. MAGTF, right? MAGTF Tactical Warfare Simulator, MTWAS. I love MTWAS. I used it immediately to train Marines to go to war, right? For me, as a C2 Marine, it didn't give me that air defense, but I used MTWAS in every exercise I ran to do ground scheme of maneuver, fires and maneuver, logistics, and then I included all the helicopters I've ever done were flown in MTWAS. Now we've advanced it, and it is the backbone of Marine Corps constructive simulation. SABT, unfortunately, they have some ideas. They're rebuilding it. We have more standalone, more COTS advanced JTAC simulators now. So we're able to kind of move with these things and train anywhere. In Pelican cases, has really increased our training usage. The Convoy Combat Simulator, CCS. Again, Marines getting in simulators that feel like they're training for real. One of my favorite ones was when the Cobra pilot, he actually flew over the convoy when they were in CCS. And if you've ever been in a convoy simulator, it's in a big warehouse with the trucks lined up, and you can see the screens. The Cobra just kept ripping by, back and forth, firing on targets, and the Marines were screaming in the trucks, get them, get them, like it was just so much fun to watch, right? No idea. But what they didn't know was that was troops in contact, that the second level above where the ace was getting them more air support, and the MEV had to make a decision on assets to fly UAS overhead, right? So we impacted directly using virtual simulation. VBS 2, right? We're about to go to what, VBS 16 now. I think it's VBS 4 or 3. Always been a fan. Did a lot of great things for us, convoy simulators, troops on the ground. We did combat town raids for high value targets during the exercise. All of this is written in the targeting process. And then your common C2 systems, C2PC, JTCW, everything that kind of goes around it. Every one of these systems had been developed for a legitimate operational purpose, but they never have been asked to function in one ecosystem. That became the mission. I'm gonna cry. So January 14th, we did our proof of concept. January 2014, we did our proof of concept. My wife is 7 months pregnant. We're all going 20-hour days. I had orders in 12 months, and the LSE was in August. Fun times. Same life we live right now. The turning point came January 2014. We conducted what became known as the IMF proof of concept. Looking back, it wasn't glamorous, it wasn't polished, it certainly wasn't perfect, but it was probably the most important event of the entire project. And I said we didn't even have to do it. I was like, oh no, we'll just go on the exercise. Thank God for PM traces. They're like, we don't do that, right? We test things before we take them to the field, right? We ensure that that architecture you saw works before we go to the field. Got to come to Orlando a lot and see it in a lab, and it was fun, right? People like Curtis and Lance Leggett, Eric, right? Emtwasley. It really helped me learn about technology and about testing and why it's so important and how we do it. It was probably the most important event for the entire project because that's where reality introduced itself. We immediately discovered that systems which work beautifully by themselves behave very different connected. One simulator translated data faster than the other. When I say that Cobra worked with SABT, had to put what's called a J bus in the middle, retranslate it. The runtime interface was probably a decade old, right? But it worked for the Marine to do it by themselves because he's just doing standalone training. But when you integrate more sims in that compute, it was tough on it. But it worked great during the exercise. Terrain database. We built a terrain database. I say we. Dave's last name and the J7. Kotick, right? Yeah, Dave Kotick and the J7, right? Luis gave me his numbers and call this guy if you want to add to the battle space. The J7 built us an entire terrain database of the actual 29 Palms town proper. So that gave us an entire virtual play box to run these convoys in, to fly aircraft in, where we would not have to deconflict sim and live. We did do that on some stuff, but this really opened the aperture for the MEB, right? It let General Mundy actually execute a MEB-sized exercise as we move forward. So Dave, the J7 came through. We had terrain for VBS. They built terrain for CCS. We were interacting with everything that went along with it. Terrain. Is terrain still a problem today? You guys fixed that, right? I don't know about that one. We're doing it though. We're all here. Time synchronization wasn't perfect. Communication paths, right? Included delays, right? Live aircraft flying in 29 Palms, communicating with the DASC. But I had the DASC on DIS radios that was controlling them, so I had to run it from RF to DIS, right? So, is there legacy in that transmission? We're talking about routing live aircraft, right? So, fun times. Different protocols assume different truths. Track management became confusing. What looked identical on PowerPoint became very different once real Marines started operating. And honestly, that was exactly what we had hoped would happen. We wanted to fail. I teach my son failure makes you better. That's what we learn in life. Every time we fail, we learn. Because failure in January meant success in August. Every interface used, we uncovered early. Every interface used, we uncovered early. Became one less operational problem in execution. Like if we learned it at proof of concept, we didn't have to learn it when we did it. We didn't learn it in the lab. I think it's upstairs. We didn't learn it. Most importantly, the proof of concept accomplished something even bigger. It convinced everyone that the vision was achievable. And believe me, I got some no's. The minute I briefed it, you can't do that. We have too many funding lines, and that's TCOM, and no, I got thousands of no's. And at that time, like I said, before I realized it, I was like, cool, we'll just do it at the MEF. We do it now. I got a Battle Sim Center. I got people like Curtis Haller, right? Tom Busini, right? He gave me the resources I needed. They're there, right? This is who we dealt with. Technology wasn't impossible. It simply required disciplined engineering. Marine Corps Lessons Learned report later identified this proof of concept as the event that demonstrated the feasibility of linking multiple simulations together and laid the foundation for the final exercise architecture. We're 255 on a roll, all right? Good. Building architecture. After January, the real engineering began. Most people imagine system integration and connecting network cables. In reality, it was system engineering on a massive scale. Every simulation understood where it fit inside the common operational picture. Tried to get him to edit that. I must have said cops 16 times in that video. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. I'm a little passionate there. AETE became the aviation backbone. MTWAS expanded the operational battle space. VBS-2 at the time represented maneuver forces and convoys. SABT supported JTAC operations. Convoys, CCS, Combat Convoy Simulator, replicated logistic operations, and we had all the C2 systems to go with it. In the wing, General Tulin picture real quick. This is how we're trying to brief generals. That's not my fault. I don't know what happened. There I was, right? There we were, sir. 3-star general. Sorry about that. But I know they had to exchange meaningful operational information. That sounds simple, but it wasn't. Because every system had been designed for a different organization. I'm going to move here, Luis. Sorry. I can share the story here that I wrote, no problem. One of the greatest misconceptions about large-scale exercise is that success is primarily on software integration. In reality, software represented only one layer of a much larger system engineering challenge. Our responsibility expanded across the entire technical ecosystem, integrating networks, simulation, command and control systems into a single coherent training environment. Every simulator serves server, network, enclave, application, gateway, interface, security boundary had to be engineered, operated as part of a unified architecture while maintaining compliance with Marine Corps cybersecurity. We don't have ATO problems right now, do we? I'm going to just kind of add them here so we can skip this a little bit. The MAGTF was instrumental. Conrad Cordova, the G6 captain at the time, his team spent months developing, coordinating, and validating hundreds of individual permissions, networks, expectations, and accreditation packages to enable a secure LVC environment. The MEF still owned the network. All right, that's why really that was kind of our responsibility. The process proved to be so resource intensive that one of the formal recommendations of emerging from LSE-14 was development of a single consolidated permissions ATO package for future large exercise. It's good training for the G6. We don't need to go too far down the ATO road. Several participants, organizations, including MAGTFTC and Regimental Combat Team 7, were already operating at 29 pounds on Garrison networks following their, what was then called ITX. Now we're into SLTEs and MWXs. CAX is what I did. I'm a little old. While the first Med Command element and the Combat Logistics Regiment established and operated on deployed tactical communications architecture. Bridging those environments required far more than simple connecting cables. Each network maintained different security policies, routing tables, trusted relationships, firewalls, implementation, accreditation boundaries. I mean, it's the same stuff we deal with right now, right? But back then we didn't have some fun AI tools or some stuff to kind of write that stuff with us. So we're moving faster, and I see that as a positive. I'm going to go here. Planning the human network. The technical network wasn't the only thing we were building. We were also building a human network. Planning began nearly a year before execution. Concept development conferences, initial planning conferences, mid-planning conferences. Just the exercise alone in live planning consists of about, I'd say, 8 conferences in a 12-year cycle where you have to support those, and that's live. All the other work that the team did, supporting our own agenda of simulation testing and planning and integration, far exceeded this list. Early rehearsal improved more than technology. It improved relationships. By August, people knew who to call. They trusted each other. They understood how organizations thought. The trust became just as important as any software interface. I'm a fan of working with people that I can trust and are honest. Software is great. Organizational integration. One of my favorite memories of LSE-14 has nothing to do with technology. It was watching the culture evolve. At the beginning of the project, every organization naturally viewed the exercise through a lens of their own responsibility. The simulator teams focused on their training devices, communication Marines focused on their networks, program managers defended their acquisitions portfolios, software developers concentrated on their applications, and every organization worked diligently within their own authorities and missions. That's exactly how large operations are designed to function. But integrating a bridge, scale, live, virtual, and constructive environment exposed challenges that no single organization could have solved alone. As planning matured, through countless technical interchange meetings, engineering working groups, communication exercises, we learned something far more important than technology. The conversation from "that's not my responsibility" shifted to "how do we solve the problem together?" Problems stopped belonging to individual organizations and became a shared. Problems stopped belonging to individual organizations and became shared, emerging challenges that everyone was invested in resolving. The cultural transformation became a true foundation of LSE success. IMAF, MAGTFTC, PM Traces, Headquarters Marine Corps C4, MEFG6, Marines, Exercise Control, Training Commands, industry partners. They all came to play. Contractors, operators, software developers all retained responsibility for their respective capabilities, but they also accepted collective responsibility for the success of the architecture. Looking back, the greatest achievement of LSE-14 was not connecting simulation or building networks. It was building a community of professionals who understood that true interoperability is not merely a technical characteristic of a system. It is a product of an organization willing to share ownership of a common mission. Then came August 2014. When the months of planning emerged, rehearsals and integration were done, what had existed as an architecture diagram, interface control document, communication plan, and integration matrix became a fully operational LVC live virtual constructive battle space spanning 29 ponds, Camp Pendleton, Camp Lejeune, Miramar, Yuma, Cherry Point, distribution centers, coalition headquarters, virtual aviation simulators, constructed and command posts, and live maneuver forces operating across multiple locations. Exercise control synchronized hundreds of scenarios. Command and control was tied in at all levels, both ground and aviation. That's that hyphen I love. The geographic distribution and technical complexity of the exercise significantly increased integration challenges, but also validated that a federated LVC architecture could successfully support brigade-level command and control across multiple installations and domains. The moment we knew we had succeeded. People often ask, when did you know LSE-14 worked? Wasn't during the technical demonstration. It wasn't after a successful connection. It wasn't after another simulator joined the Federation. It happened much later. It happened during execution. Commanders stopped asking technology questions. Is the sim on the ADTV connected? Nobody asked. Is VBS synchronized? Where's the enemy? What are our fires? We were fully integrated to a large-scale exercise at an operational level. 10 years later, the lesson of large-scale exercise 2014 remains remarkably relevant. We learned that operational requirements must always drive technology. Not the other way around. And that truly interoperability extends far beyond software integration. It encompasses system engineering, cybersecurity, governance. Walt told me a lot about that. Leadership, policy. Mentor over there. Communication, training. Above all, people work towards a common objective. We also learned that successful integration cannot be improved. Through planning, discipline, rehearsal, early technical integration, shared ownership across organizations are essential to reducing risk of delivering operational capability. I can rattle off, today we talk about artificial intelligence, digital twin, Maven, cloud architecture, right? These are what we're doing. These sound like entirely new ideas, but in many ways they aren't. It's not hard to technically solve the problem. We did it with a lot less technology. But the emergent principles remain exactly the same. Trusted architectures, reliable interfaces, shared operational pictures, data standards, discipline, system engineering, human collaboration. Those foundations were strengthened during LS-13, and many of today's innovations are standing on that foundation. Closing, I leave you with one final thought. Over the years, people have often asked me, what's the hardest system to integrate in LSE-14? Many expect my answer would be, the ATE, right? The aviation distributed virtual training environment, MTWAS to aviation command and control. One of the many simulation systems that form the backbone of the live virtual constructive environment. The truth is, none of those were the most difficult challenges. The hardest interface we had to engineer was the one between organizations. Maybe it's because I had a 2-star general in funding. I don't know. Every participating command arrived with its own mission, priorities, processes, funding lines, security requirements, institutional culture. Achieving technical interoperability requires first achieving organizational interoperability, building trust, establishing common objective, and creating an environment where engineering operators, communicators, and trainers, acquisition professionals, leadership viewed as a shared responsibility rather than individual accomplishments. Once that foundation of trust was established, technology was easy. That's the team, or at least the backbone. There's a lot of people missing. 10 years later, I believe during legacy like LSE, we demonstrated far more success integrating simulators, networks, and command and control. We proved that the Marine Corps could bring together diverse organizations, disciplines, and operational capabilities before existed at that scale. Today, entering an era of defined artificial intelligence, digital twin, cloud-native architecture, and increasingly sophisticated modeling technologies, these capabilities will continue to evolve just as they have over the past decade. Innovation is because of the people we choose to collaborate with. If you work with me, I want to work with everybody. That's what I do. Trust one another, accept ownership of a common mission. The lesson is relevant today as it was in 2014. The last thing I'll say here is this was our last meeting. I actually drove to, there's Captain Cordova, right? You can see him. I want to point him out. He was instrumental. You know, and I don't know who was in that meeting, but I remember saying it in 2014. I said, stop fighting. And I still say it again. We got to get along in industry, in government, in organizations, right? Everything I speak for today is me and the history of what we did there. That success is there. Look back at the history and take it for what it is. And I appreciate all the mentors and leadership that helped me get here today. Thank you.
So I'm going to shift gears a little bit to the training value of LSE-14. So while a lot of goals are focused on the interoperability, integration, and the technical capabilities, there was a lot of people that weren't believers that it actually would provide value. Yeah, we connected, but what did we get out of it? So my team was charged with figuring that out and asking the question is there training value? Can you actually demonstrate that to us? There was a lot of doubters that the value came along with the investment. So we had a team put together to look at what is the potential value of this training and is there any value? So we developed an evaluation plan inclusive of measures of effectiveness, measures of performance, and we defined it in 2 parts. First, effectiveness of supporting the training TNR events. If we can't get credit for the training events, then we're not accomplishing training. The second part was the effectiveness of supporting the cost. Is it cost effective to actually put this together? Those are the 2 key elements that we needed to answer. In order to do that, we put together a team with support from MAGTFTC, had several ISD supports, as well as Greg Seaver's entire cost team. So while the instruction design team worked with me on measuring the training that was being obtained, we then turned around and worked with Greg Seaver's team on putting numbers to that. You know, what did that actually cost us? And what was the cost avoidance if we had to do it in another way? So during the planning conferences, well, Rob was jumping from room to room between the ACE and the GCD, LCE, you know, I was in another room and we're getting these MCTs that were being thrown out there, what mission essential tasks and METs that they wanted to try and accomplish for the primary training audience. And we had to try and figure out, okay, what would we train for the secondary and tertiary audience? So if you go to your TNR manuals and you pull up a MET, there's actually a map that you can follow through the TNR to find supporting TNRs that support the higher ones, right? Well, we were getting METs out of each of the different planning conferences. And we had to try and go across 20-some TNR manuals and find things. Oh, well, if they're going to train that, can we train that in using this particular sim? At that time, there was no mapping of the simulation to TNR events. That didn't come around until 2018. So we were manually reading over 20 manuals at the same time that these guys were sitting in another room defining what METs they want to train to. So we were mad scrambling to try and identify what can we train virtually. And when we were doing that, we weren't just looking at what can I train in this traditionally in each device. We were looking for what can I train in that device now that it's connected, or now because of safety that we couldn't train live. So, for example, a safety issue, in live training, you don't shoot ammo over top of a unit. In simulation, we can. So we're looking at things like that we could find. What could we actually utilize? And so we did a extensive review of, I think over 20 TNR manuals to map that out. In the end, we came up with a master list of TNR events that we believe that could be enabled by connecting the devices that traditionally are not trained in simulation. So during the actual event, we had a team out at the different locations at the Battle Sim Center, all the way down at Pendleton, where the guys in the Cobra was, guys out at Camp Wilson, and so forth. So we were screening. They call us the scientists. All the scientists are out here, right? But we had a team out at each locations in order to do the data collection, right? So we were kept collecting whether or not they were actually performing the TNR to standard. And then we were collecting the information on data sheets, from the people who were doing the training. Hey, how did this work for you? Did you get something out of this? And collecting that, conversational data from it as well. So one of the biggest things that we were trying to do as part of that, and one reason why we wanted a representative of every location, because we were trying to find the observations of the unplanned training value. We spent all that time going through the manuals, speculating on what could be potentially accomplished by doing a connection, but what didn't we know? What didn't we think of? And what can we capture from the actual units doing training? And we captured many things. And one of the biggest things to that is actually the unplanned injects. So while during the mission planning of the exercises, they plan out these injects they're going to put in there. But when you have live comms, so you have a unit in the CCS or unit on VBS, and they're connected on live comms to the regiment. Now you have real fog of war happening in communications that you don't traditionally get. So, for example, in the CCS, we had a platoon leader that gave the wrong packs count. So they got told, don't leave the wire, hold, and it took, I forget how, almost an hour they were sitting in the CCS before they were allowed to leave, before the commander figured out he had the wrong count of people in the CCS. But at the regiment, they thought they had lost Marine on the range. So another example we had in the CCS, where we had a VBS connected with CCS, flying a CASEVAC in VBS. And unfortunately, with issues with ground terrain correlation, it crashed when it tried to land. Well, that created then a downbird in a CASEVAC situation. That went across the wire up like it's supposed to, gets into the COP, and they go to do the air task order, doing everything they do to respond to a CASEVAC that turned into a downed aircraft. And then somebody goes, wait a minute, that's not on my map. It was in the virtual map. But in the meantime, everything had stopped on the exercise, because when you have an injured Marine, you stop the training, because that becomes priority. In real life, you don't stop. That just becomes another action that you have to do in theater. So we had it created that situation by putting this together. And that was an unplanned inject, right? So that was some of the examples of things that we had things happening every day that we were capturing through this. So the assessment that we did, we had to prioritize the ability for the training audiences to get credit. So not only did we identify TNRs, we had to assess, did they train to standard? So it's not just that, we executed this, it's we met the standard, it's in the manual, that I would get the same credit as if I'd done it live. So we had to go through all those TNR events for all the Marines that were involved in the simulation and do that assessment in comparison to live training. And in order to say, yeah, they would have gotten credit. At the time of LSE-14, they still could not get the credit because the manuals did not have it in there, that they couldn't get the credit from doing it in simulation. The second aspect of that was also would be able to get credits because they were actually executing their SOPs and their TTPs. They were not just publishers creating traffic for the primary training audience. Because they were executing their own SOPs, they were finding their own mistakes, refining their own SOPs, and actually going through their actual training, and in fact getting better training than they normally get at home station, because now they were connected on live comms through the command chain that they did not normally get at home station. For many of them, this is the only time they ever had live communication up to CLR or the different groups that they never ever get at home station training. In the for a second time, I'm going to skip down a little bit. In the end, the analysis conducted proved that this LVC setup did in fact support training that could not otherwise been given without great expense or safety compromises, while still adding additional realistic fog of war in communications that's never achieved during home station training. In 2018, the Marine Corps started the process to update TNR manuals for TNR events to recognize the training value of simulation. In 2018, we supported the update of 18 TNR manuals for the Marine Corps. They held conferences, what they call TNR conferences, for those updates. And PM Trace had sent representatives from my team to those conferences with the data that we had on the verification validations of our simulations. So we walked into the rooms with actual V&V reports and said, yes, this TNR, we evaluated it, we compared it to live, and the Marine gets the same training out of it. And that supported the update to the TNR manuals. There's, I think, over 20 manuals today have TNR codes, they call them SIN codes in them. And it was based off of that V&V work that we had done, as well as the report coming from the LSE-14. Today, I know that TCOM is working to have the ability to update TNRs based on completed V&Vs as they occur in the future, without having to rely on a biannual TNR conference structure where personalities often dominate the room. It's going to be important for the simulation community to make sure we stay true to our test and evaluation to complete V&Vs, evaluating not only how does the system work alone in the way it's defined, but also how does it work in an LVC configuration and different types of LVC configurations so that the manuals can be updated with that information. Going forward, I see V&V remaining an extremely important priority for continuing to make sure the Marines get credit for their training when they connect systems together. Thank you.
All right, I'm going to speak to you without notes and take a couple steps back and look at LSE-14 from the perspective of what came before and what came afterwards. I didn't have any direct participation in the planning and the testing. I showed up here as the program manager about 2 weeks before the exercise execution. So Dan Torgler and I flew out there and we traveled from 29 Palms to Yuma to Camp Pendleton and saw various aspects of it during the execution phase and gathered some impressions and so forth. But stepping back to the early 2000s, when I first arrived at 29 Palms at the Battle Sim Center as modeling and simulation officer, one of the first things I was told by the G3 was, we just got a J10 node installed, and I didn't know what a J10 was. And it's a joint tactical or joint training experimentation, joint training enterprise network, managed by then Joint Forces Command. Great. What does it allow us to do? That was the question that Colonel Seaton had for me. What can we do with this J10? And as I explored that and went through the paperwork to get an ATO or an ATC for that, authority to connect, I was told, well, the J10 exists to serve the COCOMs. When there's a COCOM exercise and the Marine Corps is going to plug in and play, then you'll have a use for the J10. And so for a couple of years, it was of no use to us at 29 Palms. Couldn't connect to anything meaningful. And it was my discussion with Luis that we said, if we could connect not a big COCOM exercise, but if we could connect two lower echelon units that need to train, we would be gathering some value for that. So that was the premise for BJFIT. We went and we asked, could we have access to this network? And like, that's highly unusual. You know, this was the team in Suffolk saying, nobody does this for Title 10 training or just one-off units. But it came to the point of, we got support from the General Zilmer at 29 Palms. Why can't we use it? So the BJFIT prototype was a very important precursor to LSE-14 because it showed that we could take ground combat element Marines, connect them to another service, SOCOM unit, and conduct meaningful training, record the TNRs, and benefit from distributed training. And that was virtual to virtual. You know, people think of LVC as we got to check all the boxes and get the trifecta to get credit for it. Really, it's more about the distribution of training and connecting people at different places where you get the value from the network. And maybe it's L, maybe it's B, maybe it's C. But that helped us generate a basis for what under the old JSID's requirement system was an initial capabilities document for the live virtual constructive training environment, LVCTE, which is still, I believe, the name of the program of record. And so we drafted this ICD, and in 2011, then CG of TCOM, Brigadier General Mel Speaks, signed the ICD for LVCTE. And about that same time, I left the staff here as a modeling and simulation officer and went to Quantico for 3 years before coming back as the program manager. And nothing seemed to happen. The ICD was not matured into a CDD, a capability development document, that actually gives you key performance parameters, key system attributes, and allows the requirement sponsor to transition it down to the program manager for acquisition of technology. And I think that the reason that nothing happened for 3 years is because TCOM realized that if we poke this thing, we're going to be told to do it. And the other part of that order to do it is you're going to have to tell us what you're going to move the money from, because you're not getting new money to build this grand training enterprise. It's a zero-sum game. And the decision of what becomes a legacy system and you take the money away from it, that was a scary proposition. And one of the biggest, scariest part of it was the belief that if we say we have to connect LVC at all these installations and bases, we don't have the money to do that, to build a parallel training network to the Marine Corps Enterprise Network. There's just not enough money. We're never going to get it. And so I'm just going to leave that alone. In comes General Tulin, 3 stars on his collar. This is when TCOM was 2 stars and SysCom was still occupied by a 1 star. And General Tulin's was the forcing function. He said, I'm tired of waiting for big Marine Corps to figure this out. You get together, SysCom, TCOM, figure out the technical side of it, send me the bill or get out of my way, and I'll do it myself. And so TCOM and SysCom said, we're absolutely going to support you, General. And so that was the coalescence of the team that Rob led as the integrator. So we did the exercise, not to rehash that. What happened afterwards? Well, afterwards, the LSE-14 was studied by more organizations than any training exercise I know. We had the Marine Corps Center for Lessons Learned, sent out an analysis team together. Office of Center for Naval Analysis had a collection team go out there. Baron Mills did his master's thesis on LSE-14. And you had tremendous amount of data gathered and analysis. And MAGTFTC, Marine Corps Tactical System Support Activity, instrumented the network and monitored all the bits and bytes flowing across it. And they discovered something really important that energized TCOM and everyone else to say, we can actually do this because we can afford it, which was, they disproved an assumption that when we've done constructive simulation, battle staff training over distributed networks for a long time. But if we connect virtual sims to it, we're going to saturate the network. We won't have enough bandwidth to do it. And what LSE-14 showed, thanks to MAGTFTC's monitoring, was we never use more than 5 megabits per second on the busiest leg of our network, which meant that we don't need to build and buy a separate training enterprise network. We can tunnel through the network that we already have. It's a problem of provision. So that energized the process to say, we're going to write that CDD. And so from 2014 to mid-2014 to 2016 and 17, the first draft of the capabilities development document was hashed out, sent up, and it got sent back to redo. There were some issues with how precise it was and how measurable the MOEs and MOPs would be for the live virtual constructive training environment. But in 2020, I believe, Major General Mullen as CGTCOM got the MROC to endorse the LVCTE, and that became, at that point, designated as Project Tripoli. So LSE-14 set the stage for Project Tripoli. And I'll offer some high-level observations on when LVC training is essential and when it's not as beneficial. When you think about this exercise as it's been described, the lower echelons, the thousands of Marines in the field and simulators and across the Marine Corps were absolutely essential for the training of the battle staff. The quality and fidelity of training at the top of that pyramid gets much, much better when you have all the radio nets and all the data passing. But for the rifleman and the truck driver and logistician, they really couldn't care less. And the quality of their training is not enhanced that much when you put layers on top of it. So when designing LVC exercises, best case, if everything were plug and play, all the technology were perfectly synced up, you could only afford to do this once a year for about 20 to 30% of the operating forces in the Marine Corps. You can't do this every day, no matter how much money you're given, because the planning cycles are just too long. But what's really valuable day in and day out, how we can use the investments in technology, is that for me, if I'm the training audience, if I'm a squad leader, I care about communications up to my platoon, to my left and right, attachments, detachments, and to my fire teams. And if I have the command and control flowing along those, and I can see through my optics and touch them with my weapons and interact with the virtual environment, I'm getting good LVC training. And so if it's a platoon, they're interested in company and units on their left and right, attachments, detachments, fire support coordination. So it's one up, one down, left and right, and you probably have high quality. And if that's all you can afford, train that unit. Do that LVC exercise. The other principle that I would offer to you is that the training only has to be good enough. The fidelity, we've gotten so enamored with cinematic quality graphics and visuals. Much of that is not essential to the quality of training. It's the fact that you can connect to people and exercise the kill chains. We don't have enough money and enough time. Nobody is going to, put a done and, final operational capability on LVC in any of the services, certainly not the Marine Corps with the way our budgets work. But I offer for consideration the most difficult, dangerous, and expensive problems, the highest priority, the things that we cannot do live, we cannot do purely virtual, almost always deal with the integration of fires, things that explode, and maneuver in close proximity. We don't have the ranges. Our safety regulations won't allow us to do danger close training with air, ground, artillery, infantry, etc. So that's where, if we can solve the problems for integration of fires and maneuver, that's a big, should always be our highest priority. I think if we haven't, if we don't have the technology to do it, that's where it's worth investing. But with that, I'll close and wrap it up. And thank you for your time and attention. I know this is a long presentation.
That may get this back up here. Okay. All right. So at this point, we've concluded the individual panel members' presentations, and we're now going to go to the panel discussion and listen to any questions we have, so that we can provide further input or requests. So we know that the future is definitely now, because you are in the audience, you are working it, you're working the problems all ends. Some of us on this side are already retired or twice retired, but I'm glad to see that the folks that are presented today still have the same energy and vigor that I recall from many years ago. So at this point, do we have any questions from the audience?
It's a good thing. You get a question.
All right, we covered a lot of bases. All right, so I got Oh, I'm sorry, yes, please stand up, identify yourself, what rank and what organization you're with.
Chief Technology Officer for CE North America.
Hey, Danny, how you doing? Good to see you.
I'm doing great. Thanks for doing this, by the way. It's fantastic. I was just thinking, 12 years ago, this is cool stuff, and now we got Triple E, and what is different really? And I know there's an answer, and I know some of it, but really what is different? I'm curious. Should we really be focusing on the same interoperability problems? Are there different problems we should be looking at, like reducing the planning conferences, or what is a good goal? Like now that we know that in 14, now that we know what we know now in Triple E, if we're going to do this again in 10 years, what kind of we'll check a box to say something like, hey, we need some progress that we didn't think about or should have thought about. That's an open-ended question.
You want to go first?
I'm sure they hear you online. You gotta use the mic so they can hear you online.
I believe the things we ought to focus on are the communication paths that we don't get to exercise on a regular basis. Maybe that, in LSE, we were thinking almost entirely in voice comm links. Yeah, there was some digital traffic paths, but today increasingly, I think it's the sensors, the automation. I think I've been out of uniform, out of government service for 8 years, but as I watch the war in Ukraine and the rise of autonomous platforms, I think the potential for autonomous systems to saturate our human decision makers, to clear fires, and to understand the picture, that's where I think we should probably invest.
I think going forward, what I would consider success is when I see that a Marine can go to MAGTFTC and get credit because they did training in connected systems. Today, still, the TNR manuals do not give credit for that. Still today, 12 years later. So I think that would be something that, the Marine Corps can get to that point. I can go in there and say, I want to do this. I can put these things together and accomplish that training that I can't get otherwise in on-station training. Then we've made a success by putting with LBC.
Thank you. What do we do different to advance? I mean, technology is flying. I go there first, right? We're going to have faster, smarter simulation tools. I think the whole COTS concept of, Department of War, how they define that we got to go faster, right? JSIG getting canceled is a step in the right direction, in my opinion. I know that's probably negotiable. I think as Triple E matures and organizational communication, that's the only way we're going to do something like this again. And that's not just TCOM or TRICIS or something like that. I'm talking industry too. A lot of competition. There's plenty of money to go around, in my opinion. That's just my opinion. But we got to have one focused effort, and that has to be the Marine at the lowest level. We all get on our own high horse, right? And we were humbled back then by General Tulin, which really helped us out. So I think that without champions in the fleet, without taking the initiative of actually participating in those planning meetings, like invest time. Like we're all so busy and have our own agenda, but if you don't go to the planning meetings, the simulators don't get used. So we have to get back to that. That we kind of got away from that since then. I was at an SLT, cycle this entire year working with the program, and lots changed. We don't have those champions out there anymore, and I think that's why we're hurting out there when it comes to actual usage of simulation. We got to put more champions out there, planners that understand MAGTF training and how it aligns with simulation.
On my end, I do hope that the adoption of technologies that will help further along and speed up the process. So I envision the future of what we could deem success as a Marine, whether you're a battalion commander and you take delivery of a new battalion, you can walk into a room where the TSCs, TSDs, they are augmented with artificial intelligence that lets you know the status of your unit, pulling it from DERs, pulling it from the TIMs. Here's the training areas that are available for you right now in the next 60 days, next 90 days. So you can do your planning instantaneously at that point. You can schedule ranges, you can get to find out what Marines have to get scheduled for medical, that be gone, leave, all that stuff. And then you focus on getting those Marines to those locations. When they show up to those locations, there's something as simple as a CAT scan or some RFID or something that quickly identifies that Marine was there, he participated in the training, their record is already updated. The first sergeant knows right away the status of his unit before the training day is even over. That's how I see the future migrating, where we're adapting this technology and making it work for us instead of us working to integrate the technology. It should be totally transparent. I can only imagine what 40 years ago when they were talking about computers in the battalion. I know when I walked into the unit in 86, there was only one computer in the entire battalion, right? Can you imagine today, you can't work without a computer. So they were talking about the kids growing up, they're digital natives. Now, I think in 20 years, those going to force, they will never know a world without AI. They will be AI natives, and their world is going to be fully, automated and autonomy and stuff. I can only imagine what that's going to be. Maybe I can live to see it long enough. I don't know, but I do hope we get to that point. And that's I think my idea of what success would be for live working, constructive, integrated training.
Can I follow up on that real quick? I go back to the classroom, right? We all have kids. If you look at a picture from 1950 and you look at a classroom that you're in right now, that's what it looks like, right? Today, right? The classroom looks exactly the same. We're building kids to work like we're all here working 40 hours, 60 hours a week, right? We're building that. This AI and how we mature. The Marine Corps has to mature the same way, right? If you go to battle sim centers, they look exactly like they did 25 years ago, right? So it's coming, but we got to evolve along with the technology.
Any other questions from the audience? Right, so let me read the closing statements here. Oh, sure.
I just want to say one more thing. Thanks to everyone for coming, and I really appreciate it. Again, it's about the Marine that we're training, right? It's about saving lives, right? We've had pilots die, we've had Marines overseas, and I just want to make sure that that's why we do this job, right? It's about the Marine that's at the lowest level, that our job is to provide that environment, as well outlined, danger safe, right? As we've all seen it done together. We have to make sure that that is the #1 priority than anything else. And that's where I live. So I appreciate it.
Thank you, Rob. All right, so the future military training is not just about replacing Marines. We're not talking about that. We're not talking about replacing them with artificial intelligence. We're talking about augmenting it, making them better. It's not about creating increasingly sophisticated simulators simply because we can. It's about creating environments where Marines, commanders, analysts, engineers, and coalition partners can think better, decide faster, experiment safely, and ultimately prepare more effectively for the complexities of modern warfare. As we look toward the next decade or beyond, several questions naturally emerge. How should artificial intelligence change the role of the white cell if you're doing war games? How do digital twins support force design before new capabilities are ever fielded? How do we ensure that data generated during training becomes institutional knowledge rather than remaining isolated within individual exercises? How do we build coalition-ready training architectures from the beginning instead of trying to integrate them after the fact, after the systems have been fielded, after they're in the program records and they are now stovepiped? And perhaps the most important question of all, how do we ensure that technology continues to serve operational objectives rather than allowing operational objectives to become constrained by the technology? Those are not engineering questions alone. Those are leadership questions. Those are acquisition questions. Those are operational questions. With that, I'd like to thank everybody who was on, all the speakers today. I hope that the follow-on questions, if you're hanging around and are going to the activities afterwards, will be openly engaging discussion. Century of experience up here with the folks that we worked with today, that covering all the aspects from operational training, acquisition, system engineering, modeling and simulation, interoperability, analytics, and military innovation. I thank you everybody for attending. This concludes today's symposium. And once again, thank the speakers. And on behalf of PM Traces, thank you, Drina Black. Thank you, Robert Sosa. Thank you, Baron Mills, who could not be here today, but helped spark the initiative to make this work. Thank you, Nathan Jones, for the pieces that I know are very valuable for leadership. They want to get the measures of effectiveness, and having someone like yourself here to talk about it is great. And thank you, Walt Gates, who I know can always work without notes. It's just amazing. I appreciate that. And thank you all for attending. And for those who are online, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Closing remarks. No problem. This was very impactful for not just the foundation, for the gentlemen that were involved with it, but for you in the community. A lot of people here work in the modeling and simulation world, and it's powerful to hear this is how it started. LSE-14 is, we wouldn't be here having jobs, being at Research Park, having Orlando be the head of modeling and simulation for the United States military without LSE-14 and this team that brought it to us and made it happen with passion. I don't know if you guys caught that, but they're very passionate about the work that they did still to this day. And if you guys were able to come and hear Justin Tigert, PM Traces, give his story a few months ago at our other PME, he's living proof of how this training saves lives. Like what Rob was saying, Justin gave a story about how his team was pinned down. They were doing an exercise. It was supposed to be great. Everything kind of changed overnight. He got shot. His commander got shot. They were the only ones who knew how to call in some air reinforcements to kind of just scare the enemy off. But there was a Lance Corporal there that knew how to do it and didn't call it in once, but called it in twice and did it absolutely perfectly. Saved everybody's life that day because Justin made sure his crew went, I think it was to El Toro, and did some training on simulators before they went into combat. So it does completely make a difference even to this day. One of the things too, Rob, that you said that I wanted to kind of point out was something along the lines about like simulation doesn't shape operations, operations shape simulations. The commandant at Modern Day Marine 2 years ago got up in front of everybody and said, listen, if what you have isn't enhancing what I'm already doing, I don't want to see it. I'm paraphrasing, of course. He said, if you're going to come to me and say, listen, if you just change this one thing, my simulator is going to work for you. He's like, that's not going to work. And that's not how you guys did this training either. So it's almost become a bit of a Marine Corps lore and rule that when it comes to simulation, you have to make sure it's enhancing what we're already doing to be successful. It was my honor and my privilege. I was a female Marine in the 90s. We weren't allowed in combat. We were in the rear with the gear, as they would say. If I told these guys, listen, if it was shiny, I stayed away from it. I got out as a corporal. I have no idea that this was even a thought process. I got out in 98 and knew that Orlando and simulation. So this is, to me, it's like my first Christmas. Like it's so powerful. And I know that we've heard so much this year. We have so much more ahead of us. And I just want to thank all of you here for putting this together. The time and dedication that came into making this PME happen for you guys today was phenomenal and a little overwhelming for me, but it was just fantastic. So next up is Buffalo Wild Wings at 4:30 today. We really hope that you will come have a beer with our panelists. Will be wings. Are hosted today by KBR. Thank you so much for you guys coming together and sponsoring our social today. A couple of events coming up for the foundation itself. The Simplify Classic is a beautiful day of golf at Heathrow Legacy Golf Club. It's only $100. You get a great lunch. You can either golf in the morning, have lunch, and then golf in the afternoon. I know it's Monday, I know, but it's really an expensive way to play at an exclusive club, and it benefits the foundation. All money raised for that goes to our scholarship fund that we do in the spring. And then on the following Friday, when you've had enough of golf, we are having a Whiskey and Warriors at the VFW in Winter Springs. only $50 a ticket. There's only 50 seats. And I have a feeling that one's gonna fill up fast. So, you know, nothing better than getting more stories and whiskeys, if you hear me. So come on down to that on the 28th. And with that, now we will conclude. Thank you.
Final note, at Buffalo Wild Wings, we are in the air-conditioned party room. We're not out on the patio, so come and relax and enjoy yourself.
Good job, Paul.
You won't be baking.